The report sets out the evidence of official conduct in a context of long-standing corruption and mismanagement at Beirut's port that allowed for tons of ammonium nitrate, a potentially explosive chemical compound, to be haphazardly and unsafely stored there for nearly 6 years. In this report, we document individual responsibility for the blast, but also the collective failure of the state to protect Beirut residents. The report is based on over 100 official documents, some of which have never been published before. It's also based on interviews with senior Lebanese government officials, security and judicial officials, and correspondence we received from officials implicated in the blast in response to questions we posed to them. We also interviewed lawyers representing individuals who have been charged, individuals with expertise in the structure of Beirut's port, and people impacted by the explosion. The report incorporates the work of investigative journalists and independent researchers who have done painstaking work to uncover the facts around the August 4 explosion. This report would not have been possible without their support and their efforts. What we found in the course of our research is that what happened on August 4, 2020 cannot be seen as an anomaly or an aberration. What happened on August 4 was the natural consequence of a system rooted in corruption and impunity and characterized by bureaucracy and mismanagement. From 1960 until 1990, Beirut's port was managed by a private company. But after the Civil War, when its 30-year concession ended, management of the port reverted to the state. When this happened, former warlords and political leaders who had a financial stake in how the port was managed could not agree on how to manage it, including on whether it should be a private or public institution. As a result, in 1993, the Council of Ministers established a provisional administrative body called the Temporary Committee for Management and Investment of the Port of Beirut. This body, which we refer to as the Port Authority, was set up to be temporary, but it continues to operate to this day. Its seats were divided among the country's main political factions, thereby making the port's management subject to power struggles between them, which in turn paralyzed decision-making. By default, the port became part of the state under the Port Authority, but it was operating without an institutional framework, and this has led to serious governance, transparency, and accountability issues. In fact, the port's governance structure has created the conditions for corruption and mismanagement to flourish. Lebanon's main political parties, including Hezbollah, the Free Patriotic Movement, the Future Movement, the Lebanese Forces, the Aman Movement, and others, benefited from the port's ambiguous status and poor governance and accountability structures. Political parties installed loyalists in prominent positions, often positioning them to accrue wealth, siphon off state revenues, smuggle goods, and evade taxes in ways that benefited them or people connected to them. The mismanagement and corruption at the port not only enriched party loyalists at the expense of the state, but it also allowed illicit and dangerous goods to enter the country undetected. A former shipping company employee described to Human Rights Watch the security vacuum and web of bribery at the port that allows for dangerous goods to enter or leave without any monitoring. He said, the companies or individuals who want to bring any types of goods, including prohibited goods, can do so if they pay customs officials enough. He underscored that the state rarely, if ever, apprehends these goods. Several major political parties in Lebanon have acknowledged the massive scale of corruption at the port, particularly by customs, and they've blamed the state for failing to address it. But while much has been said about corruption at the port, little has been done to combat it. The general inefficiency, mismanagement, corruption, and political malfeasance that has plagued the Beirut port for decades all contributed to the devastating blast on August 4th. It is within this context that 2,750 tons of high-density ammonium nitrate entered into the port on board the Rosa's ship in November of 2013. The widely reported narrative regarding the arrival of the Rosas in the port goes like this. The ship's cargo was bound for Mozambique. It entered Beirut's port to load seismic equipment it was then meant to deliver to Jordan before traveling onward to Mozambique. The ship's owner was a Russian national, and the owner of the ammonium nitrate on board, Savaro Limited, was a chemical trading company in the UK. When you scrutinize this narrative, however, it's not clear that any of these assertions are true. In fact, the Rosas was rented to transport an estimated 160 tons of seismic equipment when it was already overweight and not equipped to do so. While Savaro Limited, the owner of the cargo, is registered in the UK, reporting by investigative journalist Firas Hatoum revealed that it's a shell company that shares a London address with other companies linked to Syrian-Russian businessmen who have been sanctioned by the US government for acting on behalf of Bashar al-Assad. The identity of Savaro Limited's beneficial owner is unknown. The identity of the actual owners of the ship has also been in question. Human Rights Watch has been able to confirm that at least until shortly after its arrival in Beirut's port, the ship was not owned by the Russian national, but rather by an individual who had links to a bank accused of having dealings with the Syrian government and Hezbollah. After the ship arrived in Beirut, it was impounded by Lebanon's enforcement department due to outstanding debts to two maritime fuel oil suppliers. This was in December 2013. After this happens, evidence suggests officials failed to disclose the potentially explosive and combustible nature of the ship's cargo and the danger that it posed, and inaccurately described its risks in the request to the judiciary to offload the merchandise off the ship onto the port. When you consider all the evidence, the lack of clarity regarding the ownership of both the ship and its cargo, the clear inability of the Rosas to perform the task it was hired to do, the half-truths that contributed to the offloading of the ammonium nitrate into Hangar 12, and you combine it with evidence that suggests that the ammonium nitrate was being siphoned off from the port, and the fact that customs officials excused the maritime agent's failure to properly identify the cargo on the ship, it raises questions regarding whether the ammonium nitrate was intended for Mozambique, as shipping documents stated, or whether there were individuals with control of the cargo and ship who wanted the ammonium nitrate to remain in Beirut. Official correspondence reflects that once the ship arrived in Beirut, Ministry of Finance and Ministry of Public Works and Transport officials failed to correctly communicate or adequately investigate the potentially explosive and combustible nature of the ship's cargo and the danger it posed. In February 2014, we see the first clear warning about the Rosas' cargo when customs official Colonel Joseph Scaff warns other customs officials that the Rosas is, quote, carrying highly dangerous and explosive ammonium nitrate that threatens public safety. Scaff died in March 2017 in suspicious circumstances, leading some to believe he was assassinated. At least 3 other murders of people thought to have information about the ammonium nitrate or the August 4 explosion have also been reported. Shortly after Scaff's unheeded warning, on April 2nd, 2014, the Beirut Harbor Master sent a letter to the director of the Directorate General of Land and Maritime Transport. This is within the Ministry of Public Works and Transport, informing him that seawater was leaking into the Rosas, that it contained ammonium nitrate, a hazardous substance, and that the ship was at risk of sinking. Days later, a law firm representing the Rosas' captain, who was not allowed to leave the impounded ship along with some of the crew, sends a letter to the Directorate General of Land and Maritime Transport requesting measures be taken to avoid a, quote, maritime catastrophe. In this letter, the firm states that ammonium nitrate is considered an extremely hazardous material due to its high flammability and because it is used in the manufacture of explosives, and that as a result, it requires taking due diligence and precaution while stocking or moving it. It further states that the interaction of ammonium nitrate with water exposes the cargo to the risk of explosion. The lawyers attach a 16-page timeline of major disasters caused by ammonium nitrate explosions. After being alerted to these risks, between April and June 2014, the director of the Directorate General of Land and Maritime Transport sends 3 letters to the case authority, which is the Lebanese state's lawyer. requesting that they take measures to sell the ship and its cargo. These letters focus only on the risk posed by the cargo due to its presence on the ship, which is at risk of sinking. They fail to ever mention that there will be risks in holding this material on land, given the potentially explosive nature of the material, and that it needs to be secured. In his June letter, the director states that the material is hazardous and inaccurately writes that the ship may explode if it sinks with the ammonium nitrate on board. While ammonium nitrate is hygroscopic, meaning it absorbs moisture and water absorption does cause it to decompose, degrade, and become more unstable. Mixing it with water would not on its own have exposed the cargo to the risk of explosion. But on the basis of this inaccurate and incomplete information, on June 27, 2014, the urgent matters judge orders the ministry to refloat the ship after moving and storing the ammonium nitrate to a, quote, suitable place that it chooses, and for it to be under the ministry's protection after taking the necessary precautions given the dangers posed by the material on board. Instead, in October 2014, port authorities transfer ammonium nitrate from the Rosas to Hangar 12, which was not an appropriate storage site. They store the ammonium nitrate alongside flammable and hazardous material in a congested and haphazard way, only hundreds of meters from a residential area, contrary to international guidelines. After the cargo is offloaded, correspondence between the ministry, signed by then Public Works and Transport Minister Fenianos, and the case authority continues to mischaracterize the threat posed by ammonium nitrate and to have the singular goal of selling or re-exporting the material instead of securing or destroying it. Neither they nor any security agency operating in the port took adequate steps to secure the material or establish an adequate emergency response plan or precautionary measures should a fire break out in the port. And in June 2020, after receiving orders from the Cassation Public Prosecutor to provide security for Hangar 12, appoint a warehouse keeper, and fix the doors and walls, they also reportedly failed to adequately supervise the repair work that may have triggered the explosion on August 4. Official correspondence shows that not just port, but also customs and army officials ignored steps they could have taken to secure or destroy the ammonium nitrate. Besides the warning from Colonel Staff in February 2014, customs officials received repeated warnings from their own staff about the risk the ammonium nitrate posed. As the ammonium nitrate was being offloaded into Hangar 12, customs official Name Brax warned that the material was dangerous and could ignite, and that Beirut's port did not have the facilities necessary to safely store the cargo. He warned of the dangers of ammonium nitrate catching fire or exploding on at least 3 other occasions: on May 9th, 2015, February 1st, 2016, and March 14th, 2018. Year after year, nothing was done to eliminate the threat. Customs officials repeatedly took steps to sell or re-export the ammonium nitrate that were procedurally incorrect. But instead of correcting their procedural error, they persisted with these same incorrect interventions, despite repeatedly being told of the procedural problems by the judiciary. Customs directors sent at least 6 letters to urgent matters judges requesting the re-export or sale of the ammonium nitrate. Each time, the judge responded in the same way, returning the letters on procedural grounds and noting that they did not have the jurisdiction to authorize the measures. 5 judicial sources that Human Rights Watch spoke with said that Customs Administration did not need judicial authorization to route the cargo, either by selling it, destroying it, or re-exporting it. They could have acted unilaterally to do so, but they never did. The Lebanese Army Command also brushed off knowledge of the ammonium nitrate in Hangar 12, saying they had no need for the material. Even after learning its nitrogen grade classified it under local law as material used to manufacture explosives and required Army approval to be imported and inspection. Despite being responsible for all security issues related to munitions at the port and being informed of the ammonium nitrate in Hangar 12, military intelligence also took no apparent steps to secure the material or establish an appropriate emergency response plan or precautionary measures. Perhaps in an attempt at bolstering its image, the Army Command released several statements announcing it had removed and safely destroyed dangerous and hazardous material at Beirut's port after the August 4 explosion, including 4,350 kilograms of ammonium nitrate. All this does, however, is spotlight that it should and could have acted similarly to secure and remove the ammonium nitrate in Hangar 12. All of this was done despite repeated warnings about the dangerous nature of ammonium nitrate and the devastating consequences that could follow from its presence in the port. Even after security officials from the Lebanese General Directorate of State Security, the executive agency of the Higher Defense Council chaired by the President, completed an investigation into the ammonium nitrate at the port, there was an unconscionable delay in reporting the threat to senior government officials, and the information they provided about the threats posed were incomplete. My colleague Aya Massoud will discuss this investigation in more detail in her remarks, as well as the steps taken by senior officials on Lebanon's Higher Defense Council, including the President and the Prime Minister, after learning about the threat. She will also describe the facts as we know them about what happened on August 4 and the failings of the Lebanese domestic investigation into the blast.
Thank you very much, Lama. As Lama said, I'll begin by discussing the circumstances around the investigation conducted by State Security into the ammonium nitrate. The General Directorate of State Security is an arm of the Higher Defense Council, which is the body tasked with implementing Lebanon's defense policy. In April 2019, State Security established an office at the port tasked with, first, fighting corruption, and second, informing the Higher Defense Council about security issues in the port. This office was headed by Major Joseph Naddaf. State Security conducted an investigation into the ammonium nitrate in Beirut's port, but as Lama mentioned, there was an unconscionable delay in reporting the threat posed by the ammonium nitrate to senior officials. And when they shared the information was incomplete. The official state security narrative, which the Director of State Security, Major General Tony Saliba, repeated to Human Rights Watch in an interview, is that Major Naddaf started investigating the ammonium nitrate in Hangar 12 after he was on a patrol in the port and noticed a broken door and hole in the wall of the hangar sometime between December 2019 and January 2020. However, a confidential source told us that State Security was informed as early as September 2019 about the ammonium nitrate by Name Brax, a customs official, after no action was taken to resolve the issue despite his repeated warnings since 2014. State security documents seen by Human Rights Watch also indicate that they began investigating the material first and then examined the outside of the hangar as part of that investigation. Naddaf informed Saliba in early 2019 of the ammonium nitrate's presence, and on January 27, 2020, Saliba instructed Naddaf to conduct a full investigation and send his findings to the competent judiciary. Naddaf completed his investigation in May 28, 2020, and his report, also seen by Human Rights Watch, details the circumstances that led to the Rosus docking in Beirut and the ammonium nitrate being stored in Hangar 12. Although Naddaf's report did have some inaccuracies, including an error in the date that the Rosus docked in Beirut, incorrectly referring to the name of the company that owned the ammonium nitrate, and an error in the name of the judge of urgent matters who ordered the cargo to be moved off the ship, the report clearly warns of the dangers of ammonium nitrate. Naddaf writes, "After consulting with one of our chemical specialists, they confirmed to us that ammonium nitrate, in case it caught fire, would cause a huge explosion with catastrophic consequences on the port of Beirut. We also fear that this material would get stolen because a thief could use it to make explosives." Nadaf also writes that they found a hole in the hangar's southern wall and noted that the hangar was not guarded. Nadaf presented his findings to the Cassation Public Prosecutor, Judge Ghassan Awaidat, on May 28, who in turn ordered Nadaf to summon 2 port officials for investigation. Nadaf did so and concluded his investigation on June 1, 2020. He then referred 1 copy to Judge Awaidat and 1 copy to the Director of State Security, Tony Saliba. Based on this investigation, Judge Awaidat instructed Nadaf to instruct the Port Authority to provide security for Hangar 12, appoint a warehouse keeper, and fix the doors and walls of the hangar. Although the investigation was completed by June 3, that evening, Saliba attended a private dinner with Prime Minister Hassan Diab's advisor, where he informed the advisor about the hazardous materials at the port, but told the advisor that the report was not yet final. It's not clear why Saliba didn't send Diab Nadaf's finalized reports. Instead, more than 6 weeks later, on July 20, 2020, Saliba sent a report about the ammonium nitrate to the president and the prime minister. Again, it's unclear why it took almost 6 weeks between Nadaf's report being finalized and a report being sent to the president and the prime minister, particularly given the warnings contained in Nadaf's report. The report sent to the president and prime minister reiterated the findings of Nadaf's investigation and warned that the ammonium nitrate, quote, could be used to make explosives as it is highly explosive and very flammable, end quote. However, while Nadaf warned in the report he prepared that if the ammonium nitrate were to ignite, it would cause a huge explosion with catastrophic consequences on the port of Beirut, that sentence was not in the July 20, 2020 State Security Report. Regardless, despite the delay and the incomplete information, Saliba informed both President Michel Aoun and Prime Minister Hassan Diab. The president chairs the Higher Defense Council, which is the highest security coordination body in the country. Prime Minister is the vice chair of that body. Prime Minister Hassan Diab was made aware of the ammonium nitrate twice. He was first informed on June 3, while Diab's advisor was at the private dinner that Saliba was also at. While Diab and Saliba both dispute the circumstances by which it happened, both of them have confirmed to Human Rights Watch that the Prime Minister learned about the ammonium nitrate on June 3 via phone. Caretaker Prime Minister Hassan Diab told us that on the same evening, he requested that state security finalize and send him their report within days, but that Saliba told us that Diab did not ask for such a report. Diab then told us, I then forgot about it and nobody followed up. There are disasters every day. Prime Minister Diab found out again about the ammonium nitrate on July 22, 2020, when he received the state security report that they had sent 2 days before. The only apparent action that Diab took with that report is to ask the Secretary General of the Higher Defense Council to send this report to the Justice Ministry and the Public Works Ministry to study it and send their recommendations. Diab told Human Rights Watch that he was not aware of how explosive ammonium nitrate was until after the blast, when he found out from television. Asked why he did not know this, given that the state security report explicitly mentioned the dangers posed by the ammonium nitrate, Diab appeared to contradict an earlier statement that he read the report by saying, the Saliba report did say ammonium nitrate was explosive, but I didn't go through the 30 pages. I gave it to my security advisor. The state security report, which Human Rights Watch reviewed, was 3 pages long with 6 pages of annexes. It was written in non-technical language, and the third sentence of the report states that ammonium nitrate is used to manufacture explosives, since it is highly explosive and highly flammable. Diab's office later told us that he did in fact read the report, and that his comment about the report being 30 pages was hyperbole. However, had he read the report, he should have been aware of the explosive nature of the ammonium nitrate prior to the blast. President Michel Aoun also found out about the ammonium nitrate at least by July 21, 2020, when he received the state security report. He said that he tasked his security advisor to follow up, but claimed that he wasn't responsible. As president of the Higher Defense Council, President Aoun has the power to unilaterally convene a meeting of the council, but he never did so regarding the ammonium nitrate before the explosion. Human Rights Watch wrote to President Aoun inquiring about why he did not put this issue on the agenda of the council, but we didn't receive a response prior to publication. During a meeting that Aoun convened on July 28, the Higher Defense Council instead discussed the COVID pandemic, a reported Israeli attack in South Lebanon, the economic situation, and the then forthcoming Special Tribunal for Lebanon verdict. Given all of this evidence, we find that government and high-level security officials failed to take the action necessary to remove the dangerous ammonium nitrate from the center of a busy residential area in the middle of a densely populated capital city, creating an unacceptable risk to life and violating Lebanon's international human rights obligations. While the causes of the fire and the explosion are still under investigation, media reports state that port authorities sent a team of workers to Hangar 12, where the ammonium nitrate was being stored, to repair the hangar on Judge Awaidat's instructions, without telling the workers what was in the hangar, without providing them instructions on security precautions, and without supervision. Whether the explosion was caused by an accidental fire sparked by maintenance work or an intentional fire or attack, culpability for the explosion still rests with those officials who knew the ammonium nitrate was being stored at the port in an unconscionable and dangerous manner and failed to do what was within their authority and under their responsibility to secure or remove it. Even after it was clear that a fire had broken out in Hangar 12, no warnings about the presence of the potentially explosive ammonium nitrate were ever given to the public or to the firefighters who responded to the scene and were tragically killed. Carlin Hette lost 3 of her family members, all of whom were firefighters, in the first seconds of the explosion. She lost her husband, Sherb El-Karam, her brother, Najib Hette, her cousin, Sherb El-Hette. She said that the firefighters were not told about the ammonium nitrate in the hangar when they were sent to put out the fire. In the hours after the explosion, the state was noticeably absent from emergency relief efforts. Volunteers and passers-by transported injured residents to nearby hospitals and removed debris from the streets. Mirna Haboush, who was driving past the port with her 2-year-old son, lost her right eye in the explosion and severely damaged her right arm. We couldn't see anything. We were stepping on blood. You're stepping on people's torn parts. I heard voices calling out, help me, but we couldn't help anyone. We barely helped ourselves, Mirna told Human Rights Watch. She added, my life changed. The first month, I couldn't accept myself. My son didn't come near me for 2 months. He was afraid of me. There's no life, even though we're still alive, but we're dead inside. They killed us from the inside. Mireille Khoury, tirelessly advocating for justice for her 15-year-old son, Elias, also told Human Rights Watch, if we don't build our country on the foundation of law and justice and holding others accountable, we'll never have a country, a home. For the sake of my son, I won't stay quiet about this thing that happened, and for the sake of his friends who carry him in their hearts, who also want to know the truth and hold accountable the people who took Elias from them. The blast was one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in history. It pulverized the port and damaged over half the city. The explosion killed 218 people, including nationals of Lebanon, Syria, Egypt, Ethiopia, Bangladesh, Palestine, the Philippines, Pakistan, the Netherlands, Canada, Germany, France, Australia, and the United States. 34 of those killed were refugees. The blast also wounded 7,000 people, of whom at least 150 acquired a physical disability, It caused untold psychological harm and damaged 77,000 apartments, displacing over 300,000 people. The explosion affected 163 public and private schools and rendered half of Beirut's healthcare centers non-functional, and it impacted 56% of the private businesses in Beirut. According to the World Bank, the explosion caused an estimated $3.8 to $4.6 billion in material damage. The explosion resulted in the violation of the right to life, as well as other human rights abuses, such as the violations of the rights to education and to an adequate standard of living, including the rights to food, housing, health, and property. It's been a year since the blast, but we're still waiting for the domestic investigation to yield answers and a hope for justice. Instead, we've documented Lebanese officials obstructing and delaying the investigation. We've documented lack of respect for fair trial standards and due process violations. While only relatively lower level officials were detained, senior officials knew of the ammonium nitrate being stored in the port. They had a responsibility to act to secure and remove it, and they failed to do so. However, investigations of their responsibility have been stymied due to various types of immunities applicable to ministers, parliamentarians, lawyers, and state employees. We'll now hear from Paul and Tracy, whose 3-year-old daughter, Alexandra, was killed in the explosion, about the events of that awful day and the state's failure to provide emergency relief and what truth and justice look like for them.
Thanks, Aya.
Thank you, Aya.
Thank you all. Thank you so much for Human Rights Watch for such great work. Once again, you show us how civil society and institutions fill the gap in failed states, as is what we have seen starting with the 4th of August and all the civil movement that came together. This is surreal. For people that would hear this for the first time, I cannot imagine how this would feel, you know? It feels like we're in a movie. It's so surreal. I can't imagine this is what happened to us. I wanna, you know, try to bring it down one notch and translate everything that was told down to a human experience that we lived, or an inhuman experience that we lived on that day and that we are still living today. What Human Rights Watch just highlighted to the world is the local responsibilities of individuals that were all aware, that all knew, since the late 2013 down to 2020. On the 4th of August at 10 minutes, you know, I know at 5:30, Tracy and I were in our home. I was working. Tracy was attending to our daughter, who had a very good friend of hers in our home. They were playing. They had just had lunch. They were enjoying the day. It was a beautiful day for us. Yet another Tuesday, our friends, the friends of my daughter left, and you know the story. What I really want to stress once again, building on the HRW report, is that these individuals that were just mentioned are a fragment of the wider political criminal regime of Lebanon. In our opinion, when Human Rights Watch says that there's a list of individuals that were aware, for me, if Michel Aoun, the president of the Republic, if Hassan Diab, if all of these officials knew, then all of them knew. We have 128 parliamentarians and I don't know, maybe 20, 30 ministers. And this is only for the time period in 2020, but what about before? There was not one of these officials or their family members that got a stitch from August 4th. What was theory before, for us, is now fact. They all knew, and let everybody know. They were all aware. And I want to try to think with all of you now, and thinking of this out loud. These guys had 40 minutes to react. Whether in position of strength of power, where they could have asked for evacuation or asked for seeking shelter, they were all aware. While we were trying to live our lives and not asking for being part of any war, not in Syria, not anywhere. We were just living our lives, and they killed us in our homes. Try to think of me as, let's try to define humanity together, because we all talk about, those big words, and we are afraid to use them. Well, let's talk about it. Isn't humanity the right for Tracy and I to live with our child, for her to play with her dolls in front in her apartment? Is it a mistake for her to be doing so in front of the harbor? Let's define humanity for me. Is it wrong for us to try and be happy, to try and enjoy the right to live, to be working from home, to have decided to establish our business in Beirut, to live there with our friends, our families? What is humanity? They had 40 minutes and they did not react. I want to try to put myself in the shoes of Michel Aoun, for instance, and just taking an example. What was he thinking at this time? So he's sitting at home, or in his palace, turned on the TV and looks at smoke coming out of the harbor. He's a pressed brigadier in the army, specializes in weaponry, and he looks at these images. He's the president of the country and supposedly the father of all, Bay al-Kil, they call it in Arabic. What does a human being think when he looks at that? In my opinion, these people waited and watched for 40 minutes, waited for us to die. What were they doing? Were they trying to do guesstimates on the number of deaths and injured? I'm sure they were very busy informing their families and friends to evacuate the area. I'm sure if we do an investigation with the telecom companies in Lebanon, we'll see messages flying through from them, left, right, and center, evacuate. Nobody got anything. They looked at us and waited for us to die. This is what happened. Is this humanity? Is it human that after the blast, imagine that, in all their corruption and failure, and let's forget about corruption, their failure that Aya and Lama just described. Imagine that they would be, I don't know how you would define, inhuman at a point where they would not react and they would not ask everybody to evacuate. Wouldn't they prepare for the after blast? Wouldn't they are very good at sending, police guys on the streets, trying to open up traffic for their MPs to pass by or for themselves. When Tracy and I were carrying our daughter that had a huge edema, down on the street, destroyed streets of Jemaize in our neighborhood, and watching people on the floor dead, trying to make a way to the first hospital, then to the Red Cross post, then to the next hospital. I had to take my dying daughter on a scooter, and Tracy was with 3 broken ribs, 4 broken vertebrae, an edema on her face, detached lungs, had to go on hitchhiking to the hospital. Should they be that inhuman, during those past 40 minutes and wait for us to die? Why didn't they have and a first relief response? It took 5 minutes.
So it looks like we're having a little technical problem there. Paul and Tracy, if you can hear us, we can't hear you any longer, it's frozen. We might move on to the next speaker, but if we regain connection with Paul and Tracy, we'll come back to them, if that's okay. Okay, so I'll pass the floor now to Ken Roth, the Executive Director of Human Rights Watch. And as I said, we'll come back to Paul and Tracy if we can reconnect with them. Thanks. Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, thank you, Lucy. And I guess I want to begin just by expressing my thanks to Paul and Tracy for joining us, although they obviously can't hear me right now. But theirs is a very important voice. And frankly, all of us at Human Rights Watch, and I'm sure all of you, feel deeply for their horrible loss. Now, because Lebanon's investigation of the Beirut blast has been so compromised, as you heard from Lama and Aya, Human Rights Watch is calling on the United Nations Human Rights Council in Geneva to initiate its own investigation, ideally at its next session in September, next month. That would contribute to justice by having a better prospect of uncovering the facts behind the blast than currently seems possible through Lebanon's own domestic process. It thus might help to end the reign of impunity that for too long has cast a long shadow over the victims of a wide range of human rights abuses in Lebanon. Now, specifically, we would like the Human Rights Council, by its usual majority vote, to establish, I see Paul and Tracy are back, so let me just stop there. And let me let Paul know.
Sorry for that. You know how electricity and internet are in the country. It's I just wanted to conclude by saying that nobody can come and try and define a crime against humanity for us, not the UN, not anybody else. We talk about technicalities. The UN, these foreign countries talk about technicalities such as systematic attempts and harm towards populations. I say, and I would like to declare in front of you all what happened on August 4th, and based on HRW's report, this is our view, to declare that this was a crime against humanity. My daughter's right to live in our home and enjoy life, this is what humanity is for us, is us living in a loving home, just enjoying, trying to make the best of our lives and living in happiness. This is humanity. It was a crime done by inhumans. These are all of the people that you mentioned in your reports, and all the people in the governments and parliaments of Lebanon since 2013. These are inhumans because they knew about what was going to happen, all of them, and they failed to act, and they failed to protect their fellow citizens, their fellow human beings. So both of these angles make me say that this is a crime against humanity. It should be treated as such. And all of the people that were involved directly or indirectly, they knew that failed to act, should be considered as traitors towards humanity, traitors at the very least towards their citizens here in Lebanon, and they should be dealt with as such. And if the judiciary